Alright guys, in today's video we're going to be talking about mono fighting in Gen 9 monotype. Yeah, I just wanted to get some discussion out. I did want to make some more metagame discussion videos, but freaking Pokemon Home, it's the release date at this point is like to be determined. Like, it's just very annoying to deal with, so like I might as well talk about the current meta right now. Like, Home could come out tomorrow for all I know. Like, it's just annoying, but not much actually. I mean, a lot changes for everything at this point, but I still want to make some content regarding fighting because I've been enjoying mono fighting recently, especially how the monotype ladder tour is going, and fighting is just one of the better types in monotype. Like, SV Monotype is very centralized. Like, there's like the top types and then there's everybody else, and I feel like fighting is like, it's not up there, obviously it's not one of the best typings. Like, it's like high, it's like low high. Like, I don't know how I'll describe it, because obviously you have like water, you have dark, you have fairy, you have ghost, and then like you have ground and flying. And then I would say, like, after like all of those types, which everyone pretty much agrees are the best of the best, fighting is definitely like after them. So, you know, it's in a decent spot in the metagame right now. But either way, what am I going to talk about in terms of fighting exactly? Now, in terms of what I'm going to talk about on fighting, we've made a mono fighting video in the past, but no, we've even made a whole video discussing why fighting is in its best position in monotypes like history since like generation 5. We've made a video on that, so if you want to check that out, I'll put a card there. But either way, that video was made like pretty much month 1 of generation 9, and the fighting type has changed because like Annihilate was still legal when I made that video, and yeah, we got rid of Annihilate pretty fast. I'm not gonna lie, that one was crazy. So like, a lot of people were angry about that because Annihilate is just one of those mons that's like really good, and obviously when something like freaking broken gets banned, there's always going to be people angry about that. But yeah, so fighting post Annihilate and pretty much just throughout their metagame so far, how's it been doing exactly? Well, fighting is one of those typings that actually is pretty decent because it does have a pretty good matchup into dark, and you know, dark is like pretty much, most of the player base would say dark is one of the best typings, or is the best typing, number 1 for sure, and obviously fighting has a type advantage against that. Now, you could argue that, you know, like even fighting still has a difficult time, you know, like some of the ones that you want to be running on fighting, like Breloom, Great Tusk, obviously things like Flamigo as well. Chien-Pao obviously does a lot to that because of its ice typing, but and like fighting can overall get overwhelmed by, like, let's say a Choice Scarf Meowscarada, because obviously that protein play rough, you get stabbed and then you just kind of OHKO everyone on fighting that isn't really that bulky. So like, it's a good matchup, but at the same time, if you position incorrectly, you definitely can lose that matchup. But most of the time, like, fighting is favored, but it's definitely something that you know, most people can play around. Like, dark can play around it. Like, Breloom's very difficult for dark to beat. I'm not gonna lie, Breloom is very difficult because, you know, as long as like if you predict the Sableye once on like a Spore, then like Sableye is pretty much finished. Like, you just SD, you get like good sleep turns, and then you kill it with Bullet Seed. Or the thing is, you try and outplay it, because like, let's say in a dark situation, dark versus fighting for example, you have Breloom with the Mop Punch, like, versus like a Choice Scarf Meowscarada. Now, Meowscarada is not a fairy type if it hasn't clicked play rough yet, and obviously Mop Punch is a +1 priority move, so obviously you just OHKO that, and you know, it's a very interesting interaction. If the dark is not running Sableye, which I've actually been seeing a decent amount of darks on the ladder so far during this ladder tour that aren't running Sableye, then you should just win. Like, it's very hard for you to lose that matchup, I'd say, like, because I have been facing dark recently with my fighting team that I've been running in the MLT right now, and like, this is my dark team right now. We have Great Tusk, Iron Hands, Breloom, Iron Valiant, Lucario, and Flamigo. If there's like no Sableye on the dark side, I don't see how you really lose this, as long as you're able to keep off hazards. Because if you're not running Sableye, odds are you're not running Spiritomb either, to be fair, because like Spiritomb is just inferior to Sableye right now. But like, no Sableye teams aren't running ghost types, which means you're able to spin with Great Tusk, and you know, like, as long as Breloom comes in safely, no hazards, it just 1v1s everyone on dark pretty easily. You Mop Punch Chien-Pao, you Mop Punch Meowscarada, you Mop Punch King Gambit. Like, there's like actually no counterplay to it. So that's why fighting is like pretty respected as a typing in general. Like, it's just good versus dark. like Breloom, like mons like Breloom as well also help out against the water matchup. It has decent matchups all around. Like you have good versus dark. If you go Flamigo, you have a decent shot against Ghost, even though Ghost is slightly favored in that scenario. Like fighting is also just pretty strong offensively as well, like super effective against 5 types. Like Steel, you're favored in that matchup as well. And like the only really bad matchups fighting has is obviously Fairy. Like you're gonna have to outplay every turn with like Lucario or like Tauros Paldea, and if you're not running any of those, your fighting team is pretty suboptimal. But yeah, if you're running one of the other, then you start to outplay the hell out of the Fairy player, and like it's still just very hard for you to even win that matchup. Flying is obviously a pretty tough one, and flying, both those types are pretty annoying for you, I'm not gonna lie. And then Bug is kind of annoying as well, because like Volcarona can just solo if like Iron Hands is chipped and you're not running Rock Slide on any of your goons. So yeah, like overall, you have you have a really solid matchup against the best type in the game, but it's balanced out by the fact that some of the other top types you kind of struggle against, e.g. Fairy and Flying, but like decent against Water and decent against Ghost as well. There's still Flutter Mane and Mimikyu on Ghost, but you know, like again, you can still just kind of play around those with AV Iron Hands depending on the Flutter Mane set. But yeah, let's move on to the way that you build fighting in SV Monotype. Now, you've obviously seen the team that I had that I've been running for MLT, but if we start from the beginning, how should you be starting your fighting type Monotype team? Now, there's a lot of I'm gonna say there's a lot of Pokemon. There isn't really that many Pokemon in the pre-home metagame, but you know, you have a good amount of options and you should be running those options at all times. E.g. Breloom, there's no reason why you, as a fighting user, there's no reason for you not to be running Breloom. Like priority, I'm pretty sure it's like the only priority fighting type mon like that actually has like stab mach punch in the game. Like none of these guys learn like stab mach punch, so obviously having that priority is pretty good. Is also one of the main ways of handling dark, to be honest. Spore is a guaranteed, you know, sleep move. Like Spore is one of the most broken moves in the game, and then you're always pretty much forced to run Focus Sash, which, you know, you can't really do much about because you really want to preserve Breloom himself. It's kind of like having a Mimikyu on offensive Fairy teams. Like you want to keep the skies up for handling, you know, dark, like taking a free hit basically. Like having a free hit on Breloom is actually so good because it's able to survive any hit, spore something, or just like revenge kill pretty reliably, and it's like the best one at doing that on fighting. So in terms of the other moves you'd run, you obviously have Bullet Seed. I don't know why I clicked Bulldoze, even though that is an option that you can run, but you know, this last slot is pretty customizable, I'm not gonna lie. You have SD, and SD, like if you set up an SD, then Dark just loses. Like again, like I already said it loses, but like I've been trying out non-SD Breloom recently, and I would say it's slightly harder for Breloom to just auto win. But like if you're like Sport SD, you just solo Dark, so you know, it's not even that bad. Even Sableye, the worst he'll do is burn you and you're still back at like neutral attacking, and like if you get 5 hits on Bullet Seed or get a bit lucky, then you should be fine. But yeah, SD, you also have Rock Tomb. Now Rock Slide over Rock Tomb over Rock Slide, obviously Technician boosted, so it ends up being stronger. Hits Volcarona for super effective damage, and you know, threatens bug based teams. You also have Bulldoze. This hits Toxapex harder, hits Poison. Yeah, it hits Poison, so you know, like you have your secondary way of hitting Poison. Also this also hits Sizzle as well. Like Rock Tomb also hits Sizzle, but Bulldoze does the same thing as well, but it's mainly for the poison. And then in terms of your EVs, like max attack, max speed, Jolly or Adamant doesn't really matter. Like I always run Adamant. There's nothing really around your speed tier that you necessarily care about, so I just go for the extra damage, unless you really want to win Breloom speed ties. But again, speed ties is just, you're gonna get unlucky and get hacked anyway, so you know, there's nothing to really worry about there. So yeah, Breloom is definitely an essential piece of fighting. Also Great Tusk, aka Landorus Tusk, Lando T, aka Great Tusk, you know, so Great Ferian, whatever. So yeah, Great Tusk. Why do I call Great Tusk Landorus T? Well, if you've been playing Gen 9 at all since day one, you know that Great Tusk is one of the most versatile Pokemon of this generation, and it's so versatile that its usage in OU is pretty much 50% or even higher than 50%, so it is literally just the next coming of Landorus T. So what does Great Tusk offer in Monotype? Because obviously you know, you have access to terrestrialization and usage-based tiering, and Great Tusk doesn't have terrestrialization, but it still just generally does the same thing. Either you go like leftovers or heavy-duty boots, rapid spin. Now, rapid spin, one word. Like, because you need hazard removal. Like, there's a lot of top types that like hazard stacking, e.g. dark. Like, again, like I said, fighting is favored, but, you know, they still can hazard stack on you and, you know, breaks Breloom Sash. So you kind of want to get rid of hazards ASAP, so Breloom Sash is always intact. Now, Fairy also hazard stacks, Ground also hazard stacks, and, you know, a lot of other typings just annoy you with like T-Spikes as well, like coming from Toxapex Water, for example. So having hazard removal and being one of the only hazard removal options on fighting with its bulk and general utility, there's no reason for you not to be running Iron Tusk on fighting. I said Iron Tusk, Great Tusk on fighting. So in terms of its other moves, you obviously have Earthquake. You definitely need one of your stabs. Generally, Earthquake is better because, you know, you can hit something like Goldengo. Yeah, even though if it's Balloon, you're hardwalled anyway, but that's why you have Knockoff in the next slot as well to hit Ghost types for super effective damage. And then the last move here, unfortunately, if you look at the hazard situation on fighting, Stealth Rockers, the only Stealth Rocker you're realistically running is Great Tusk. So generally on fighting, it likes to roll compress into this, you know, utility Great Tusk set with Knockoff, EQ, Rapid Spin, and Stealth Rock. Not to say that it cannot run any other sets. If you need a spinner, there's always Quaquaval, which has Rapid Spin. So you could definitely go more offensive Great Tusk, whether that's Choice Band, Choice Scarf, Bulk Up, Rapid Spin. It can run all of those sets in Monotype quite effectively, but this is generally the most common Great Tusk set you'd see. And then I think the EV spread is 288 defense and then 48 speed, I believe. In terms of the speed on Great Tusk, I'm pretty sure it's just to reach some benchmark. So even you're running even more speed on this. Yeah, let's see what my Great Tusk team here is. Yeah, 48 speed. So that should outspeed base 100s, which is still generally outspeeding ones like Baxcalibur, Goldengo. Should outspeed Sandy Shocks at +1, to be honest. Yeah, because this reaches 331 speed if I recall correctly. So yeah, Great Tusk just hit some speed margins. The EVs are pretty customizable. A lot of people have ran all sorts of things on Great Tusk, to be fair. So yeah, very versatile Pokemon. You can't really go without Great Tusk. Like, its typing is also just pretty solid, and it's just a bulky, physically defensive Pokemon. So there's no, like, Great Tusk can even live like Meowscarada, play rough from full HP and then knock it off, and then they lose their speed control option on Dark. So again, things like this just make the matchups a lot easier. So that's why Great Tusk is here. Iron Hands, another versatile Pokemon on fighting. This is like your best way of not getting folded by Flutter Mane instantly, because obviously this one just clicks Moonblast versus fighting, and ooh, you just have no switch-ins. So obviously the most common set that Iron Hands has been running on mono fighting is Assault Vest. Now if you go Assault Vest, max HP, max special defense, with a careful nature, yeah, like this, you basically have a mon that is unable to get 2-hit killed by non-Choice Specs Flutter Mane Moonblast. Now, why is this good? Because Iron Hands is able to counteract any non-Choice Specs Flutter Mane set, take the hit, and then Oko with Heavy Slam. Heavy Slam is also useful in the Fairy matchup as well, particularly against other Fairy special attackers as well, like Iron Valiant and Hatterene. You're able to 2-hit kill them with Heavy Slam. I'm pretty sure Iron Valiant even gets Oko'd by Heavy Slam as well after like a couple of chip. So yeah, you have Heavy Slam there, you have Drain Punch to recover some damage. You obviously need a fighting stab move, and Drain Punch is your best option because it gives you back some HP, especially if you manage to like Drain Punch like a Ting Lu, for example. The amount of HP you're recovering back is quite solid as well. In terms of your next moves, Earthquake is always an option. This targets opposing Iron Hands. We have Rock Slide, and then Volt Switch as well. Like, I do prefer Thunder Punch, but I've liked Volt Switch in recent times because, like, Flutter Mane, everyone knows that Iron Hands is able to live Flutter Mane attacks unless it's like Choice Specs, and then they're pretty much forced to swap out. And then in terms of matchups like that, you're able to Volt Switch, and it's just nice to have. Excuse me. Oh god, my nose is running. But yeah, this is also a pretty standard set on fighting. And then the next mon you want to be running, Well, let's get the essentials out of the way, and then I'll talk about other options that you could run. The next essential I'd say is Iron Valiant. There's no reason not to be running Iron Valiant. This also helps in the fighting mirror. Is a fairy type as well, so this is why Dark struggles versus fighting, because you have the likes of Breloom, the type disadvantage, and also Iron Valiant, which is a fairy type. Now, Iron Valiant is mostly 2 sets on mono fighting. It's either choice specs or it's choice scarf. Choice specs because you want a strong special attacker, and fighting isn't really known for having those because, you know, it's just CC spam, you know. But in the past we've had Keldeo as a fighting special attacker, and Iron Valiant is probably the best special attacker fighting has because it's fast and it hits hard. Like, if you've seen these stats, it hits very hard. So what is the common moveset on choice Valiant? It doesn't really matter what set it is, it's typically running the same moves. But you have Moonblast. You definitely want Moonblast. T-Bolt to hit Corviknight, and then you have Trick as well. Trick is very useful for crippling like common switchings like Corviknight, Skeledirge, Toxapex, for example. Though Toxapex doesn't really like taking T-Bolt, but it's easy to play around that because, you know, Toxapex comes in, then probably goes like Gastrodon or Quagsire, depending on what electric immunity that water team is running. But yeah, Trick is just very useful because Iron Valiant is it hits hard, but it's very easy to switch in. Like, there's a lot of defensive Pokemon that can switch into Iron Valiant, and having Trick is very useful. And then the last slot, it can be a combination of many moves. It can be Shadow Ball to punish Skeledirge and mons like Goldengo, because realistically, things like Goldengo and Skeledirge resist Moonblast, and T-Bolt again does decent damage coming from choice spec sets, but choice scarf sets definitely don't really break at all with Thunderbolt. So Shadow Ball against ghost based teams are very useful. You also have knockoff as well, like mixed Iron Valiant, because this one has 130 attack and you should be using it if you can. So yeah, knockoff is also decent as well. And then Aura Sphere, but I think most people have dropped running fighting stab on Iron Valiant. It's not really necessary, and Aura Sphere isn't really hitting that hard. Like, at this point you'd go Focus Blast, but Focus Blast has 8 PP and 70% accuracy, so it's a very inconsistent move for your to be locking into. So yeah, you just focus more on Iron Valiant's pretty solid coverage options. So I typically just go Shadow Ball. It doesn't really matter this last move. It really depends on what matchups you want to be having a better shot against, because there was a time when I was facing a ghost team and you know, Great Tusk was dead, and you know, obviously can just get burnt by Skeledirge, because unless it's like choice banded, you're not Oko in Skeledirge. So, you know, that's why I tend to run Shadow Ball, so my ghost matchup is a bit better. So yeah, max special attack, max speed, that also works, and all of that good stuff. And then yeah, these 4 are mainly the bread and butter of fighting. There's no reason for you not to be running these 4, and like, these are just the standard fighting ones. Now you have 2 slots left, and you're probably thinking, how else can I fill up these slots? Because you have the rest of these mons to choose from, and I'm going to tell you now, most of them are pretty bad. Like, you're not going to be running Crabominable, you're not going to be running Phalanx. You're also not really running Medicham or Persimmon. Medicham not because it doesn't hit hard or is not a threatening Pokemon, it's because Gallade exists, number 1, and then Persimmon, like, what? Like, Persimmon, like, who cares about that guy? So yeah, let's actually talk about the next couple of options that you're able to run on you know, fighting. So we pretty much got all of the OU fightings out of the way, and obviously I'm not including Chestnut because realistically that one is not OU. We got Iron Hands out of the way. So yeah, looking here, you obviously don't have to do it based on usage-based tiering. If you look at Dark, Skuntank is a PU Pokemon, yet is used a lot on different types of Dark builds. So tiering doesn't necessarily mean anything in Monotype whatsoever, but in terms of a type like fighting, looking at UU is probably your next best bet, because you have Gallade up next, and Gallade, his role on fighting is pretty much a choice scarf set, because obviously at this point you have 4 mons here, and they're relatively slow mons outside of Iron Valiant, so you'd want some speed control here. Now Gallade is in a pretty solid spot in Generation 9 because of the fact that it has sharpness as its ability, which means that it's able to run moves like Leaf Blade and Sacred Sword. Now Sacred Sword is basically stronger CC now, and oh god, Sorry about that. Yeah. So Sacred Sword is, you know, stronger than CC and it hits very hard. You also have really solid coverage options in knockoff, and then you have Psycho Cut. Now you run Leaf Blade because it hits water type super effectively, and it's just a solid coverage option against something like Sableye, which, you know, comes in on Gallade every single time. You either knock that off, get rid of its boots, which is actually pretty decent, but it's not like fighting is really like it's not a hazard stacking type, so knocking off Sableye's heavy duty boots isn't really the biggest thing in the world, but at least it's able to take, you know, rocks based damage, or you Leaf Blade the water type switch into all ground. This is also a good way of handling ground based teams as well. So yeah, max attack, max speed, the EVs are pretty standard. This is Gallade's main role on fighting, and you know, it exists as well. What else exists is Flamigo. Now Flamigo at the start of the generation wasn't really picking up steam, I'm not gonna lie. Most builds on fighting were running the top 4, so Breloom, Great Tusk, Iron Hands, and Iron Valiant. They had Gallade as a scarf, and then they had like Tauros, Paldea, Blaze, the Fire Tauros, to, you know, break the screens of fairy type teams, and also that was neutral to fairy. Now I'm gonna be talking about Tauros, Paldea soon enough, or even teams were running Koquevo in the past, but a lot of people now are just tending to go like Flamigo as their choice scarfer, so they're not necessarily going Gallade, and then they go like Lucario or Tauros, Paldea in the last slot. Now, what's Flamigo's role on fighting? Again, similar to Gallade, it is a choice scarfer, but I find that Flamigo is a more consistent speed control option on fighting these days because of its ability Scrappy. Now, what Scrappy does, if you don't know, is that you're able to hit ghost types with normal and fighting based moves. Now, normal type doesn't mean anything to Flamigo because it's not a normal type, but being able to hit CC on everything and not having any fear of, you know, ghost types coming in is pretty solid. It means that Sableye is unable to switch into you, because if it's able to hit you with fighting type moves, it's dying because it's a dark type, and then you're able to hit Goldengo for super effective damage because, you know, you're able to hit ghost types. So yeah, Flamigo is a very solid speed control option. I do also prefer it over Gallade because of the higher speed tier. 80 versus 90, you know, this can't outspeed Scarf and Didi, for example, at least female. No, they don't run female. I'm tripping, but you know, 80 versus 90 is still pretty relevant enough, and you know, Flamigo's base 90, so it's just faster. And then the mirror matchup, let's say they're running Scarf Gallade, and then like Specs Valiant, at least Scarf Flamigo is able to outspeed Gallade and just spam Brave Bird versus that. So in situations like that, that's why I prefer Flamigo. Now, close combat U-turn Brave Bird, pretty solid coverage overall. Fighting Flying is definitely one of the most potent offensive, you know, dual typings out there. And then the last move is Throat Chop to hit opposing ghosts as well, because Flower Main resists close combat, of course, if it's able to get hit. And even though you can probably just go Brave Bird to Oko that thing, like, you still just have the option of hitting other ghost types that are neutral to fighting as well, like Skeledirge for super effective damage. To be fair, Throat Chop is weaker than CC, but at the same time, you do just need the last move at this point. There's nothing else you can really run. So yeah, so these are your common speed control options on fighting. And of course, you're typically not running both of these guys at the same time. You'll pretty much choose Gallade or Flamigo as your speed control option. So in terms of if I want to go Flamigo now, what is the last mon that I'm going to be running in this slot? Now, I honestly think there's realistically only 2 options, or 3 options left if I really want to reach right now. The first option is Poor Mott, which is because of Revival Blessing being a move of all time. But I generally don't like Poor Mott because you're stacking same type with Iron Hands, and outside of Revival Blessing, Poor Mott is just an average Pokemon at best. It does hit kind of hard, but you know, it basically has no like defensive utility at all. And you know, the other Pokemon that you could be running in the Poor Mott slot really offer a lot more. And the second one that I want to talk about here is Lucario. Now, Lucario is your way of fighting the fairy matchup, in my opinion, because at least if you're running Lucario here, you're able to threaten fairy because, you know, you have Steel Stab, you have Meteor Mash as your strong Steel Stab, and then you have Bullet Punch as priority. Now, Bullet Punch is very threatening because against fairy, Like, Fluttermane dies to Bullet Punch. Like, he's not living at all under any circumstances. And obviously, you can Bullet Punch something like Grimmsnarl to, you know, 2-hit KO it, so you can realistically only get up one screen, whether that's Reflect or Light Screen, and you're able to stop that from getting both screens up, which would be very useful for something like Valiant, which, you know, attacks on the special side, and then, yeah, stuff like that. It's typically just a Swords Dance set. There's not really much else you can really run on Lucario, because it's not that fast. You wouldn't really run Band on it either, so this is typically just the best Lucario set you can run. Definitely here for the Fairy matchup. It does hit hard as well with a Life Orb CC, don't get me wrong, it's a very strong Pokemon, but yeah, Lucario's main niche on fighting is generally just easing the Fairy matchup, even though it gives you a shot. At least it gives you a much higher chance of winning that matchup if you play your cards correctly. And then the third mon that you can run on fighting, which has definitely fallen off in recent times, this was really coming back at the start of the generation, is Tauros Paldea Blaze. Now, why do I say Tauros Paldea Blaze in terms of Lucario as well? Because you're able to Raging Bull Klefki, which you know, is the common screens mon on Fairy now. Raging Bull is a move that changes typing with Tauros Paldea's typing, the primary typing. So, you know, Tauros Paldea is a fire type, so Raging Bull is, you know, a fire type move. It's super effective against Klefki, breaks screens, and yeah, generally means that Fairy's not able to get up screens, which works out better for you, to be honest, because at least you're able to play around the matchup a bit easier. Also breaks screens on dark based teams, but nowadays they're not really running screens Grimmsnarl, so its niche there is like less necessary. And yeah, but Intimidate is generally just a good ability. It also hits hard as well and is faster than Lucario as well. So base 100 speed, pretty solid in Monotype, all things considered. It's gonna, okay, it doesn't show me unreleased Pokemon. That's pretty solid, I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, being faster than Mimikyu, you're also neutral against Fairy, so you're able to revenge kill a lot as well. So that's why Tauros Paldea is pretty solid as well. But yeah, it's definitely not a necessity on fighting, and I'll definitely lean towards Lucario right now. But you could definitely have a successful fighting type team with Tauros Paldea, that's for sure. But yeah, this is typically how you'd build SV Monotype in this current metagame right now. Let's talk about some of the other, let's talk about the niche options, the ones that like are kind of just forgotten about in exactly. We'll talk about Quaquaval now, because you know, this mon is not a bad choice by any means. It's just that, like, if you want a spinner, Great Tusk is mostly the better option in my opinion. And even though it can definitely snowball out of control, don't get me wrong, like Aqua Step, if you're able to revenge kill someone with Aqua Step, you get a Moxie boost. This mon can be very dangerous, but again, like, it's not really a necessary component of you know, fighting. And then obviously you're just kind of, you're missing out on something if you go Quaquaval, in my opinion, because realistically, I don't think you're really dropping Great Tusk on fighting, regardless of if you're just like, oh, Quaquaval is going to be my primary spinner, and then I can go like another Great Tusk set. But yeah, you're definitely just missing out on something here, that's for sure. Because now, I have to go Breloom, I have to go these top four, and then what? Like, I can go Flamigo. Like, I'm missing something. I'm missing Lucario, which definitely makes the Fairy matchup a lot worse for me. But at that point, it doesn't really matter. At this point, it just really depends on what you want to be better against or what you want to be worse against. That's pretty much how Monotype is for certain types in this generation. And then last one, like Lucario. Like, at this point, I feel like you'd be forced to go like Scarf Valiant or Scarf Great Tusk, and it's definitely buildable. Like, you can definitely go with D6 or go like Tauros Paldea or Flamigo at this point. I think Flamigo is probably better here than Lucario, but yeah, definitely can fit Quaquaval here. But yeah, it's just a bit of an awkward mon sometimes, because I feel like you want some other options that is, you know, Quaquaval's taking up that spot. Just leave the Rapid Spin into Great Tusk most of the time, to be honest. So yeah, like, I wouldn't say it's niche, it definitely exists, but not a mon that like I want to be running regularly. And why do I keep right clicking, man? Jesus. But yeah, other niche Pokemon, realistically, like, I don't want to be going over anything else really. Like, you're not running Toxicroak, you're not running like regular Tauros, you're not running any of these NU guys, you're not running any of the PU guys. Like, the only thing I could realistically talk about is Halucha. Like, that's probably the last mon that you should actually consider on a serious fighting team. Why do I say Halucha? Because it's able to mold break a defog on Goldengo, and you know, is a more solid removal option than Great Tusk, because you know Rapid Spin can be blocked by ghost types, while defog can't be blocked at all if you know you have the ability mold breaker. So yeah, this is mainly Halucha's niche. I haven't seen Halucha at all on fighting since like the start of the generation. It makes you think that you know the mold breaker defog niche isn't actually that like necessary of a niche whatsoever. And obviously like offensive Halucha doesn't really exist either, because like if you're running offensive Halucha, why? Like, we have no terrain on fighting right now, so there's no reason for you to be running Halucha right now. So like its only niche is defog mold break, and outside of that is just an average, you know, offensive Pokemon without terrain. So yeah, that is it for fighting, to be honest. Hopefully you guys kind of got an insight on how to build the type right now. I feel like I tried Chestnut, but I feel like that was on grass. I don't really think Chestnut has any business on fighting, to be honest. Like, especially if you're running both Breloom and Chestnut, it doesn't make any sense. Like, you'll be running Chestnut over Breloom, you lose out on priority. I guess you could argue like some freaking belly drum set, but Chestnut's way too slow to realistically pull that off. There's no Terror to help it out. Like, it's still just going to lose to Moonblast. If only Bulletproof blocked Moonblast, that would be very useful. But yeah, that is it for fighting. Hopefully you guys got an insight. Let me know what your favorite one is to use on SV Mono fighting, and I feel like in my next Monotype video I'll be discussing another typing that I like using a lot and how to build that. But hopefully Home doesn't come out anytime soon, or else this video just kind of gets invalidated. But yeah, before I end this video, what is coming back in Pokemon Home that would change the landscape for fighting? You have Galarian Zapdos, which might put Flamigo back in unemployment, but at the same time Zapdos Galar doesn't have Scrappy to hit ghost types, and I think it lost Throat Chop with transfer moves aren't coming back with Pokemon Home. So you could argue a case for Flamigo versus Galarian Zapdos, but still this one hits harder, is faster, and you know still generally has the same moveset outside of you know being able to hit ghost types for super effective damage. We have Sneasler as well, which is going to be a crazy Pokemon, honestly. And then we have Hisuian Lilligant as well, and Hisuian Decidueye, which probably won't exist, but, you know, because it's too slow, realistically. And then Zamazenta, which odds are is probably getting banned. But, yeah, other than that, yeah, we're getting some fun ones with fighting. But, yeah, thanks for watching the video, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.